Okay, so the question is, you talked about instilling love of Islam, and Allah, but how do we instill also the fear? It is important to balance the two. It is like the hope and fear, the raja and khawf is very important. It's like the two wings of a bird. And you do have to mention it, and if you're reading the Quran, there's always a balance. You always see that there is, with every verse about Jannah, there's a verse about the hellfire. So it does balance out, and you find that different people are motivated differently. The psychology behind a person, some people will only be motivated if they are rewarded. Other people will not be motivated unless there is some kind of penalty. I'll give you an example. We had I was doing intensive Arabic, and the professor said you have to study 2 hours a day. There's a Somalian brother who said, will you beat us if we don't do the homework? The professor says, no, I'm not going to beat you. He goes, well, I'm not doing the homework. So there's some people, unless there's punishment, so you just have to keep it balanced. But I find that majority of the people put a lot of emphasis on just scaring and not enough putting love.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. I actually did a little bit of an experiment when I actually asked people at a conference in Baltimore 2 years ago. I said, how many of you are more motivated by mention of hellfire? And literally half of them raised their hands, and I said, what about heaven? The other half raised their hands, and it was almost, subhanAllah, exactly 50-50. And even the Sahaba had their different personalities. Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman radiallahu anhu, he said that the Sahaba used to always ask the Prophet ﷺ about good things. He says, Kuntu as'aluhu an ash-shar, and I would ask him about bad things so that I could, because that was what worked for him, that's what resonated with him, were the verses of hellfire and fear and those types of things. And so I think from a tazkiyah perspective, a spirituality perspective, when you reach a level where you can handle those verses of hellfire and fear, it's probably better for you, but using them with other people, you don't know where the other person is at. And so that's why I think it can be very dangerous with children and even giving advice to someone, to cause them too much fear to where it could lead to despair. Questions? Yeah.
A couple of questions. You've probably heard of the bad cop, good cop concept. So what would you say about that? And the other aspect about maybe if you can elaborate on the father's role a little bit.
Okay.
Let me.
Please. The conference.
Well, we don't want to say it yet. She'll answer the first question, so we'll handle the other one later.
Okay. All right. So your question was?
About good cop and bad cop.
Good cop, bad cop. It's a good approach. We always use it. Good cop, bad cop. Don't both gang up on your kids. If one of you is mad, make sure the other one is trying to reduce the punishment, trying to appease your kids. So definitely, it's just too much when a child has both parents be mad at them. So it is good to create that balance. You said there was a follow-up? Or no? Well, okay. Okay. How do you do that without undermining the other parent? Would you like to address? No? Okay. All right. All right. You have to be on the same page, okay? So you don't do that unless you both have agreed, okay? Sometimes, if my husband is being harsh, like, go be the good cop, So it's like this agreement is something that we have agreed upon. I'm not undermining him. I'm not going and trying to reduce it without him knowing. So we have to be on the same page. And I think I skipped one part about how important it is to have a good relationship with your spouse. And that is critical in good parenting, that you respect one another, you don't argue in front of each other, because kids are little psychologists, and as soon as they see, there's a difference, I'm going to go right there, and they will go. If one parent says no and they know the other one's going to say yes, they're going to play that up. So you have to be on the same team and always make sure that you have each other's back. Okay. So the question is, what do you do? How do you, if your child is not responding to you and you're out and you're telling me not to use threats, okay? Well, you can take away privileges. For instance, let's say you're going to the park and you say, and your child is having a tantrum, and you could say, if you act out, we're returning home, and you follow through with that. Or if you don't follow what I'm saying, you're going to lose your privilege of whatever it is. So taking away privileges is a lot more humane than I'm going to leave you at the side of the street if you don't settle down. Okay, with the toddlers, you have to do a lot of training at home, that they realize what's right, what's wrong, be consistent, you know, and if you keep training them in this, they're going to start learning, and they're very capable. Don't underestimate a toddler.
Yeah. I forgot who was first. Yeah. I think you were first. Go ahead. I can't hear you, I'm sorry. How do you do ihsan to parents? Okay. The question is, how do you show ihsan to parents that have passed away? What do you do for parents that have passed away? Look, you need to understand, number one, that their situation is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if they were non-Muslims, you're not submitting that Allah is going to punish them. You're just, you know, so the point is that their situation is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter who they were, whether they appear to be the most righteous person in the world to you or the most wicked person in the world. Their situation is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The things that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that continue for a person are sadaqah jariyah, knowledge that benefits, and dua. So continuous charity, dua, and knowledge. And what I would say is being righteous, being a good person, especially acting upon something that they taught you, is a means of good going to them as well, inshallah ta'ala. So especially if your parents taught you salah, they're still getting the reward of that salah as long as you pray. So I think carrying on whatever righteous and good things they've taught you. I think a lot of people emphasize, doing certain things on, that have a more instant effective gratification, in the sense that, like, I want to have a tombstone and I'll do Surah Al-Fatiha on it for $20,000. Your parents will hate you on the Day of Judgment, because that could have been $20,000 in charity for them, and you wasted it in something that's haram. So sometimes we need to feel better about the situation and say, oh, we need to do this for them and do that for them. So we depart from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the sunnah is really quiet, dua, giving charity. If you want to pass around some books, sponsoring students of knowledge around the world, donating to Islamic schools, institutions, all of those are things, inshallah, that are continuous charity and beneficial knowledge that can carry on for them. Allahu A'lam. Oh, this is for me? Okay. All right, if I feel... Okay. Actually, I told her to ask you this question. If I feel my teenager is lying about praying, should I ask them to pray? Or I'm making them, or am I helping them lie? My answer to that question, and I'm going to ask Sister Haleh to correct me or confirm but my answer to that question is, I think digging too deep is not healthy, and I don't think you're required as a parent to dig too deep, because I think if you start showing su'al dhann and suspicion and always think they're lying, then they're never going to be motivated to pray, and it's no longer going to be about salah, it's going to be about making sure that you think that they're praying. So I think that there's a balance with that, and asking and making sure. And the easiest way, and not enough of us do this at home, is pray with the family, and that starts with me. Pray with your kids. Make that a habit. That way it's no longer about me asking you, did you pray or not? Like, all right, it's dhuhr time, let's all pray together. It's asr time, let's all pray together, inshallah. That's I think something easy that we should all try to implement. And I feel bad saying that, because sometimes I want my peace of mind, so I don't pray around the kids, because it's, I want to enjoy my salah a little bit more. But I think we can all do that, inshallah. Especially with older kids, I think it's very beneficial to pray as a family.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, when you are constantly suspicious of them and they are doing it, or you're suspicious of them doing something bad and they're not doing it, they're going to eventually fall into that. So I think exactly what the Sheikh said, just trust them and have them join you. There is a question here that says, I have a good relations with my 13-year-old daughter and 4-year-old son, but my 17-year-old son is rebellious and is always playing online video games and has become an introvert, does not care about his future, has bad relationship with his father, and my husband and I are very different in upbringing and having a very unstable marriage. I fear for my kids, especially my oldest, how to communicate better with him. My husband focuses only on my son's grades, but I want him to be a good person first, a good Muslim, a good character, a strong, active Muslim. But my husband and I do not get along in anything. What to do? Your phone number, please. Okay. All right. I think a lot of times when people are not having good relationships, it really does affect the children. Sometimes you may think that they don't feel it, but they feel the tension. And especially in teenage years, they're very vulnerable. And I think that the best thing you can do for your kids is improve your marriage. So whether that means, getting some help, working on it, if it's that damaging, you may have to even reevaluate the situation, because you don't want to lose your kids because of the bad relationship or the tension in the home. And the key is to spend time, like the example I gave about that teenage daughter. Just have fun with your son, connect with him. Show interest in the things that he loves, and try to just spend that time and listen to him.
So to add on to that, honestly, I can just kind of reflect on my own personal life, and obviously with us, especially those of us that have parents that grew up in an entirely different context, it is difficult to relate. But I can tell you that, I appreciated, I was into basketball growing up, so I appreciated when my dad came up and, came outside and tried to play basketball. He wasn't very good at it at all, and he had a very awkward shot, and I hope he never sees this, but, mashallah, it was just the best time of the day when he came outside and he was trying to throw it and trying to make a shot, and, it was amazing. So taking interest, subhanAllah, in your kids' interests is really something else, and I think a lot of times parents don't value that enough, like, oh, you're wasting your time on football, astaghfirullah, now I'm going to go watch cricket for 8 hours, or watch soccer because that's more halal apparently. No, take interest in your kids' interests and things of that sort. And also the good marriage thing, I can't even speak about this from a perspective of the psychology of the children and things, that only just when I was an imam, I used to always tell my wife this as well, that I've almost noticed consistently that when there's a dysfunctional marriage, the children start questioning faith, and they start questioning why this and why that. Because they associate, I think, the entire, especially children of immigrant parents, they associate the entire thing as Islam. Like everything that's coming from this household is one lifestyle, and then what I'm getting on the outside is another lifestyle. They attribute it all to Islam and the backwardness and things of that sort. So it's really, really important. And you always see the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So for example, the hadiths where the Prophet ﷺ is being nice to his wives, a lot of them are narrated by Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Some of the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ when he treats Aisha radiallahu anha in a certain way, narrated by Fatima radiallahu anha. So the Prophet ﷺ made this apparent to the children in his household, the way that he was treating his spouse, and I think it's very beneficial. There's a question here, and the question is, all these single mothers that were mentioned and things of that sort, what about the husband? What's he supposed to do? What if, being a divorcee or being a widow is one thing, but what if the husband's there and, you don't know what he should do? What do you advise a married woman whose husband doesn't practice or do what they're supposed to do to show the example to the kids? I'm just going to say this, and this isn't to the questioner at all. I don't know who asked the question, but anytime I do any program or any topic, or we do any program at ILF, we get criticized from all ends of the spectrum. So with the greatest moms, for example, I think, there were some people that said this is sexist. Why are you telling women to be moms only? I said, have you any idea about who we're talking about? So we got attacked by some, there were actually people that were tweeting at me and sending things like, is this part of your attempt to tell women they shouldn't work and they should just be mothers? I was like, a'udhu billah. And then on the other hand, like the next tweet is, brothers that are saying you're pandering to women, and why aren't you talking about greatest dads as well? And astaghfirullah, I'm like, you guys have got to be kidding me. So no, the goal of the program was not to say that women should be single moms and that you'll be okay and you should strive to be a widow or a divorcee, and not a self-inflicted widowness. That's not a word. By killing your husband so that you can raise a Shafi'i doesn't count, all right? If the husband's home, he has rights as well, and he has responsibilities. And we also see great fathers in the history of Islam and things of that sort, and they get a lot more attention than great moms, which is why we did the program. Which is why, again, I ask you guys, Ali ibn Abi Talib, who's a central figure in our deen, a central figure. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah says there is no Sahabi in the history of even in Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah who has more ahadith narrated about his fada'il, and you guys couldn't name his mother. I found that problematic. So what I will say is that when it comes to the husband, I think that obviously he has a role to play, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has assigned the responsibilities to both. What I'll say to a woman who's got a husband that doesn't practice, number one, and this is a difficult thing for me to say, and again, we don't do this black and white, but there's a level of practice that your husband has to be practicing to be considered your husband even. A husband who's tariq salah, who leaves salah, should be threatened with divorce, honestly. By an imam and a proper procedure, things of that sort. You can't stay married to a person who continues to abandon prayer. And I think a lot of times, subhanAllah, I was at a program recently, and a sister came to me, and just listen to the way she asked the question. She said, Sheikh, my husband drinks and my husband beats me. Can you give me some advice on how to have sabr? You see, the way that she asked the question, an American-born sister too. My husband drinks and beats me. Can you give me advice on how to have sabr? I said, before we talk about how to have sabr, how about we talk about your husband drinking and beating you, right? And solving that problem. So there are clear responsibilities, for everyone in the household. And again, at a certain level of not practicing, you need to really even reconsider that marriage as a whole. And I'm not saying go home and if your husband's not praying, say, I just found out that I have to divorce you. But initiate the conversation that this is necessary for me to have a relationship with you, you need to be practicing. For me to stay in a marriage with you, you need to be practicing. And if it's not going to happen, there are certain things that need to be done afterwards. Are you sorting the question?
Yeah, I think that one is for you. It says, if my parents are working and very busy, how can I grow my relationship with my 10-year-old brother if he has behavioral issues and I have to act as the disciplinarian 99% of the time? And this is sad, and it's too common for little kids to become the mom figure. And a lot of times when that happens, I actually did a conference for teenagers at the Richardson Mosque. And one girl came up to me and said, I've had to be responsible for my little sister. And she's like, I have just wasted my entire childhood because I have to chase after. And she said that she didn't even want to have kids when she grows up. So we have to be really careful about not putting unnecessary burden on the older kids in raising the kid. That is our responsibility. And it's sad when a child is concerned about their kids. And I think this here is a problem of the parents not taking correct responsibility. I think they need to address this, and she needs to be a sibling, not a parent. So if you see that happening in your household, really address it, because you're going to raise your kids to not even want to have their own kids because they've been busy raising yours.
Yes, I'll take a question from the crowd, inshallah. I'll take a question from the audience, yes. So you're talking about children that look to the outside and they feel like they don't have enough? SubhanAllah, I went on a rant on this at the last Bayna, Amazed by Quran conference actually, and I think everyone should probably go online maybe and just search that up. It was a panel discussion with Ustad Nu'man, Sheikh Abdul Nasir, Sheikh Muslima Permal, Sheikh Nu'man Beg and myself, and we talked about this. And I think that one of the major issues, one of the biggest mistakes I see parents making today is they're teaching their children that everything in life comes easy. You grow up and you've got your flat screen TV, you've got your personal laptop, and as long as you get good grades, we'll buy you a Benz when you're 16 years old. And that's a that's destroying that child. And it says in the Quran that shaitan's challenge, وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ, that you'll find that the majority of people are not grateful. Ingratitude disconnects a person from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, disconnects a person from ibadah, disconnects a person from a need to even discover a higher purpose and things of that sort. I think exposing your kids to service, there are certain things that are just of value and things that are slowly being lost. And when I talk about back in the day, I mean growing up in the 80s and the 90s for me, right? I'm not talking about back in the day as in the 60s and the 70s, but we had allowances. You didn't just get everything, you had to work for things. You wanted a pair of shoes, you cut the grass a few times until you were able to do it. You were able to get enough money. Then you decide whether or not you want to buy it. So you learn financial responsibility and being exposed to service. My father, Jazallah khair, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him, had very strong principles in this regard. And one thing that he did was during the crisis in Bosnia and Kosovo, he actually adopted a family, and they were in an apartment right next to us, and we used to go there very young and we'd go to Walmart and we'd shop for them and take stuff over to them and have dinner with them. That had an immense impact on my life. That changed my life forever. That experience, and I grew up and I heard all these stories about, cousins in Palestine that were run over by tanks and that were murdered, and I have a lot of refugees in my family and things of that sort. But actually being exposed firsthand to refugees and kids that were my age that left a war-torn country, it had an immense impact on my life. And I felt embarrassed to ask my dad for $150 pair of shoes after that. Honestly, I felt embarrassed to ask my dad for stuff like that. So exposing them in the capacity of service. MashaAllah, we have those opportunities here. We have the ICNA Relief Food Pantry, you have Feed the Hungry programs, you have shelters and you have food banks here, even in the Muslim community. Expose your children to that, inshallah ta'ala, in the capacity of service. Wallahu a'lam.
This says, what do you say to your parents when they compare you to other people's kids or your own siblings without being or getting angry or being disrespectful? So this is coming from a little kid who wants to know how the parents can stop comparing him. And I think there is so much damage that is done when you compare your kids to other people and to their sibling. It actually creates this sibling rivalry. When you start favoring one child over another, or you start saying, oh, look at Ahmed, mashallah, look at his grades, oh, Sarah, mashallah, she's so neat, and you start making this comparison, then it creates a lot of animosity in the heart. So as a child, you can approach your parents, and it is very tough. I think it's tough. Hopefully, if your parents are here, they can take this advice that the best thing to do is not to make comparison, and that goes also with comparing your wife to others. That it's just comparison makes a person feel very inadequate, and nothing good comes out of it. So that's the advice. If you want to add any.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay. I'll just answer this question, then I'll let Sister Haleh handle the rest, inshallah. Last question for me. My question is, how do you relate to all the stories of the women that you told today? Few things that are common or that are shared in the relationship of mother and son. Lots of advice. I just see not much fun, and which lesson should I take? The only thing I talk about in general, relating to the stories of the Sahaba and relating to these stories of these great people, it's important to understand, obviously, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put even the Prophet ﷺ, who's the greatest creation of all time, an infallible human being, in situations that we can relate to. Now again, the point of this topic was to talk about the contribution that they made, and basically, number one, just understanding that you really do have a vital role to play in the ummah as a mother, and that you can achieve amazing things. But as Sister Haleh said, I think the main thing was, it wasn't just dua. Ash-Shafi'i was not just a dua. Abu Hanifa was not just a dua. These were moms that, going to you know how degrading it was for a woman from the Hashemites, right, from the family of the Prophet ﷺ, being the mother of a Shafi'i, going to the dumpsters to gather bones and to gather old used government papers so that her son could go to school and write. So the point is that it was struggle, and that struggle is important. And I think Imam Malik's mom, right, not despairing when her child wanted to be a singer. You know, she just tried to sit him down and reason with him, right? And imagine if Imam Malik would have become a singer, you know. SubhanAllah, we would have lost out on so much. So the point is that you see where you can draw parallels with your own life. You have to sit down and see where you can draw those parallels and where you can benefit from. And sometimes it's really just the maw'idah. Sometimes it's just the idea that, you know what, this is what they were capable of doing. This is what I can contribute, and this is what I'm capable of doing, inshallah. The rest is for you.
Okay. Right. This one says, you advise that we as parents should have the right friends. Islam also teaches us not to sever these ties of kinship. So how do you deal with family members who are not practicing or who are very liberal? Well, I deal with that, and it's not about severing ties with your family. It's about the friendships that you can choose. If you can choose the friends and you can choose them to be righteous people, then that's wonderful. It's actually a very good learning process in teaching tolerance and teaching how to effectively do dawah. When you do have family members who are liberal and who are not practicing, you can teach them that. You know, I always say there's like 3 different groups of people. Some, they don't know. They haven't been taught. There are some who know, but they just don't have the strength to apply the things that they know. And there's some who know, and unfortunately, they don't apply it. They don't care enough to apply it. And I think if we teach them that at ease, even Muslims fall into that category of falling short, and being tolerant and accepting and doing dawah by your behavior. I think with family members, it's not the words that you say, but it's just being loving, being there, and showing your dawah through your behavior, inshallah.
Can I have a follow-up question on that? When you have 2 parents who do 2 different things, like you have one example of softness and compassion, and then you have another example of harshness and just taking care of like the physical actions of Islam, you know, salah, and just making sure that they're on time, and it doesn't create a good environment for kids to appreciate Islam or want to be Muslim. And when they pull away from it, how do you bring them back to it? We have 2 different examples of it.
Would you like to address that? No? Okay. All right. So you're saying that 2 parents, one is all about compassion, the other one is all about rituals. Actually, I think that you can, at least it's a balance. At least they're getting, it's not a balance. Okay. So the child is running away because one parent is being too restrictive. You need to maybe make sure that you build that rapport with that child and try to instill enough values and make them experience Islam in all its beauty. And there's no way of communicating with the spouse to reduce?
It's not my child.
Okay.
I'm not married. So.
Okay. It's not me, it's a friend. All right, this time it's really a friend. I always hear that. I have a friend. All right. Okay, well, I think it's critical to communicate. I think husbands and wives, they need to communicate. They have to realize the importance of being on the same page, and I know that doesn't always happen. So if the mom can try to take that son or daughter and try to have them have a lot of positive experiences to kind of reduce the counter effect, to counter all that negativity, that may help. Yes. Okay, please.
What I would add to that, honestly, is that I know situations where the dad is very strict on one thing and the mom is not, or vice versa. Actually, many on the opposite end as well. But the ones that I know that have worked are where the kids respect both parents in the sense that I don't think you're backwards or crazy. Like, this is your interpretation, this is how you express yourself, this is what you do, but at the same time, there's a genuine respect and there's a genuine admiration and love. So I think that as long as that part is there, then you're able to, as parents at least, you're able to maintain that authority. Now for the kids, it's really just trying to, just the way that we deal with brothers and sisters, trying to benefit from people in the best way possible, trying to take from the goodness that from each parent, from each personality, the same way you do with your brothers and sisters, benefiting from their good while overlooking their flaws. But for the parents, they need to maintain credibility with their kids and respect. Time is up, unfortunately. I want to thank you all. Jazakumullah khair to all of you who tuned in on site and online. Again, please do support the project.